Alright dudes, welcome! Today we're doing a run through of everything that was in the recent Promised Land feature-length special of Red Dwarf. Absolutely brilliant to have a feature-length, movie-length version of Red Dwarf. Really excited, so let's run through everything that was in there, a few Easter eggs and a few little things that I noticed. The Promised Land opens with what has to be the most succinct and well-written overview of the Red Dwarf story so far. We get text on screen with a wonderful planet background to give a really serious feeling, decent, grown-up movie introduction to this Red Dwarf special. That seriousness is broken a few seconds later when the ships of the cat race make a brilliant-looking cat face across some moon or planet that they're passing. Absolutely brilliant little touch there. And this is the first of many brilliant visual jokes throughout this special. Visual jokes seem to be a real highlight of this special. We're then introduced to the Feral King, the leader of the cat people. He doesn't seem a particularly nice guy as he's in the middle of torturing another cat. We get a few lovely bits of dialogue here with the cat being tortured, just simply giving in and admitting what he did was wrong. It's a nice little counterpoint to all of the Feral King's anger. Just as the Feral King seems to be about to deliver the killing blow, he's interrupted by his aide coming into the room. We get a great visual gag here of the aide coming through an 8-foot wide giant cat flap. This is a great visual joke and it's pretty much just as funny towards the end of the episode as it is the first time you see it. I absolutely loved it. We learned that there's a few more feral cats that have been spreading the teachings of the Holy One, and we're presented with another version of the Cat Holy Book. Just like what we saw back in Waiting for God from Series 1 Episode 4, we get another holy book with some pictures of Cloister or Lister. However, this time they're drawn to be even more obviously Lister, as they really do look quite a lot like Craig Charles. A couple more of the holy type cats are brought in before the Feral King decides that all three should be executed publicly. We then get another great moment of something being built up to be serious before another visual gag. As the three cats are being led, apparently to their deaths, one of them gets slipped what appears to be some sort of weapon, but just a few seconds later, the gag hits us. It's a laser pointer. Absolutely brilliant little gag here. The laser pointer puts a red dot on the wall that has the guards escorting the holy cats completely transfixed and utterly obsessed with the red dot, allowing the holy cats to get away to some sort of shuttle bay and away in a little ship. We also see that one of the cats seems to be signing. This could mean she's deaf, or it could just mean she can't speak. The craft escapes from the rest of the cat fleet, and they decide to set a course for what they term the ship of their birth, which we can see very clearly is Red Dwarf. We then get our typical Red Dwarf opening credits, but of course instead of a whole series worth of clips to show, these are all clips from this feature-length special. The opening credits serve to transition us from the semi-serious scene of the cat ship to the completely absurd scenes we're about to get on Red Dwarf. We see Lister pushing a cart full of what looks like complete trash, and it's brilliant to hear him humming the song as he goes. Not for the first time, Lister seems to be having some sort of minor breakdown and looking for things to pass the time and distract himself from the dull reality of his life in space. This time around, he's collecting useless junk from one of the cargo holds and hoarding it for absolutely no good reason. Crichton and the cat try to discuss this with him and point out the absurdity of some of the items he's collecting, before we get a fantastically ridiculous conversation with Crichton suggesting that the cat have a sex change operation to become a woman so that Lister and the cat could have a child together. I love how Robert delivers these lines. It's so funny to see him interrupting himself to keep on saying, "Let me finish." It's a really funny way of delivering this. The conversation turns even more ridiculous when the cat and Lister end up having an argument as to who would make the hotter, better woman. Rimmer then shows up and asks Crichton to follow him. Crichton follows him in a slightly bizarre way, before having a conversation with Rimmer where engaging and disengaging his lie mode keeps happening out loud, leading to Crichton realising he needs to have a service. We also see that Crichton is looking really battered and bruised at this point. He's rusty, lacking paint, he's got patches of metal sort of riveted or welded on here and there. He's looking in a real sorry state. Even his centre glass on his belly looks cracked. Once in the science room, it's revealed that something is flying towards Red Dwarf at an enormous speed. We get Crichton doing a brilliantly funny test to find out whether it's a ship or a missile, simply standing and waiting to see if anything blows up. Once they establish that it's a ship, they look into a message that they're receiving. Crichton cleans this up, and it's shown to be an SOS distress call. Although unclear to the characters, we can hear that it's the voice of the holy male cat from earlier. Rimmer, in brilliant comical style, simply tells Crichton to sod them. He's had enough of rescuing people and being involved in adventures and thinks it's time to put his feet up. Instead, ordering Crichton to delete the memory of receiving the SOS call. We then get a brilliantly comical scene of Crichton deleting the call, Rimmer accidentally reminding him about the call, and Crichton investigating and refinding it. This happens 2 or 3 times over before they get interrupted by the cat and Lister arriving. Lister and the cat are really excited because they have found Holly's backup disc. Another great bit of visual comedy here, as the disc they bring in is a good 4 feet wide. As a bit of a fan of retro tech, I loved seeing a big old floppy disk made to look even more big and ridiculous. It's also great to see that when they turn the disc around, it seems to have been written on by hand, a great nod to the way that we all used to handwrite on discs when we made a backup of something. Crichton directs the boys where the disc needs to go, and it still works. And we get another little bit of retro comedy here, as we get a traditional dial-up tone for loading up Holly. This surely must have brought back plenty of memories for people. And then eventually we get to see the face of Holly. Unfortunately, Holly seems to be on factory settings with no knowledge of the last 3 million years and what happened. Rimmer therefore takes it upon himself to introduce everybody. Interestingly, he introduces himself as a first technician, not a second. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, whether he's trying to big himself up to Holly and make himself sound 1 command point higher than he really is, whether since season 12 he's somehow managed to get promoted despite the fact that there's no officer on board to promote him, or whether this is just some sort of script mistake. As it turns out that Crichton and the cat are not registered crew members, and that Dave forfeited all crew member privileges when he snuck a cat on board 3 million years ago, Holly declares that he must decommission and dispose of the ship. Very much like Pre tried to do in the episode Fathers and Sons from Series 10 Episode 2. And Holly's attitude also reminds me a bit of Queeg from Series 2 Episode 5. Holly declares that in 7 days' time, the ship will begin to be decommissioned and the guys need to leave. We then get a humorous scene of Rimmer, Lister and the cat in an airlock trying to discuss what they're going to do about Holly. This is a great little parody of 2001 A Space Odyssey, where the crew there are trying to hide from the computer HAL. In 2001 A Space Odyssey, HAL simply reads their lips to find out what they're saying. In The Promised Land, our boys have actually figured that out and cover up their lips. However, in great comedy style, everything they say is being blasted throughout the ship as they've left the intercom on. A great moment from this has to be Chris Barry saying that Holly is a dozy wazzock. Just the way he delivers it is so funny. Anyhow, the boys' plan is to detonate an EMP that will knock out all of the ship's main computer systems, including Holly. However, upon exiting the airlock, Holly reveals that he heard everything, including dozy wazzock. But the boys boast that it's too late, as in 10 seconds' time, Crichton will be detonating the EMP. However, just a moment later, Crichton turns up, sweeping the corridor nonchalantly to inform the boys that everything is set to detonate the bomb at midnight. As unfortunately David got mixed up as to whether 12 AM or 12 PM means noon. Holly simply seals off the area where the EMP is, and the boys' plan is completely scuppered. Holly, in annoyance, also makes the boys leave the ship immediately. Rimmer then admits that a ship did pass recently and send out an SOS. So they make a plan to jump in a starbug and catch up the other ship. Something Dave reckons will take only a few days, but after flying around for 3 months, they still haven't found the other ship. What they do find instead is an abandoned ship called the Iron Star. It's a good few hundred years newer than Red Dwarf and far more advanced. As Crichton, Lister and the cat explore the Iron Star, Rimmer stays behind to keep himself protected in Starbug, and we get of course one of his wrongly quoted Space Corps directives. The boys then discover some sort of science room that has extremely advanced hollow projection facilities. They also find a couple of forks which are meant to help you lose weight by forming a force field around foods that you declare you can't eat. And when Crichton says that they have the tech there to potentially upgrade Rimmer, Rimmer comes running to them. Apparently the tech can upgrade a light bee to diamond light quantum energy. It's not entirely clear what that will mean, and it's not entirely clear whether it will be safe. But Rimmer says he doesn't want to mess around with any safety checks and wants the upgrade immediately. We then get a great scene, which is surprisingly nostalgic, of Rimmer being upgraded step by step, and with every step, his uniform goes through the different years of Red Dwarf. We see him in his tan coloured uniform from the first couple of series, the green uniform, red quilted, blue quilted, until eventually he turns into Diamond Light. This is a fantastic uniform which is superhero-esque, but completely over the top and ridiculous. I particularly love the wig and the fake tan to give him a macho look. It's absolutely brilliant. And for the first few moments, he even gets a deeper voice. Rimmer shows that he can pass through walls whilst taking a solid object with him, and to also turn himself into a small ball of light and fly at super speed through the corridors of the ship. Deciding he's some sort of superhero, Rimmer calls himself the Mighty Light, before malfunctioning and deactivating. Dave picks him up and declares him to be instead the Shitey Sprite. Rimmer's then reactivated back in his normal hard light form, however now he's fried his battery. Turns out Rimmer can only manage a few minutes without some external power source before the rest of his battery will be depleted and he'll be gone forever. Something the cat takes delight in telling him, but is holding himself back from fully celebrating as he's not sure whether it's going to kill Rimmer yet. And to get about the ship, he's going to have to use a bunch of extensions. It's really funny to see these extensions which just look like the sort of regular 13 amp household things that you'd have here in the UK for perhaps running your lawnmower or a hedge trimmer in the garden. Rimmer, in his annoyance looking for someone to blame, points straight at Crichton and puts him on report for listening to me. Whilst exploring the ship, the guys come across the 3 holy cats that we saw earlier. The cat that we saw doing sign language earlier suddenly can speak, and the cats declare it a miracle and start to bow down before Lister, or Cloister. The cats' names are revealed to be Brother Soul, Sister Luna, and Sister Peanut. It's funny to hear the name Peanut, as it reminded me of the sort of silly thing that people do name their cats. And in reference to all of Lister's famous curries, the cats call him the Holy Poppadom. When Dave tries to explain that he's just a normal man, the cats get even more excited, declaring him to be truly humble. The cats give Dave a special holy relic, the Anubis Stone, which Crichton explains was a god from ancient Egypt who took care of embalming. Before Crichton explains that despite first thinking the stone was a super rare mineral, it turns out to just be varnished beetle dung, which he reveals just about a moment after Dave had already started licking it. The cats then start singing a comical Cloister Cloister song. Dave tells them that's not even his name is Lister, so they just change the song to Lister Lister. He then begins to try and explain properly what happened with him and Frankenstein 3 million years earlier and why he isn't really a god. The cats excitedly fall to their knees in preparation for the sermon in the corridor. After Crichton's advice that Dave should maybe play along and not break the cats' hearts, Dave decides to play along and act like a god. They all move back to the Iron Star's science room, where the feral cats are waiting for them. After a heated discussion, the feral king sends his aide to collect the Anubis Stone. As nobody puts up any real fight, he simply takes it from Sister Luna, who was expecting Cloister to save her. The feral king and his aide then teleport away, leaving his goons with instructions to flush everybody out of an airlock. We then get a great comical fight with Dave and Kat fighting off 2 of the goons, using the 2 vegan forks that they found earlier. However, the vegan forks won't allow them to stab any meat, so they are completely stuck. But just as Dave gets a piece of lettuce that would allow him to stab and gain the upper hand, the cats simply pull a gun on him. As the ship begins to disintegrate, the floor falls away from beneath the 2 goons, which the Holy Cats, of course, see as a miracle performed by Cloister. They then all escape in Starbug. As Starbug takes off to escape the Iron Star, something familiar happens. Something I have seen before and jumped out at me and made me make this face. The takeoff sequence and flying through the shuttle bay has been recycled. This is something we've seen before. Literally, it's something we've seen before, as it's a reuse from a short scene in the episode Give and Take, from Series 11, Episode 3. They've slightly darkened it and mirrored the second part of the sequence, but it's the exact same takeoff. Now, I'm not criticising here, as reusing old material and having slightly cheaper wonky sets is actually really charming and definitely something we've seen before in Red Dwarf. I actually kind of found this fun. And it wasn't out of context, it still looks like a really great takeoff and explosion scene. So not a negative, just something I noticed. As they fly away from the Iron Star, it fully disintegrates and blows up, and some of the debris smashes into Starbug. The rear section's on fire, so Dave seems to have no choice but to quickly jettison it. Now this is a really clever little scene. We have seen Starbug separate into separate modules before. Back in Season 7, Episode 1, Tika to Ride, in the director's cut, we see a comical scene of Rimmer tricking Lister into accidentally separating the rear section of the ship whilst he's still in it. Now back then the ship was explained to have been massively increased in size due to some weird, timey, paradoxy stuff that made the ship much bigger and more capable. So when it separates, the bigger, more capable front section simply flies away using its own engines. However, in the Promised Land, the ship is of a normal size, it's just a small Starbug. So when it separates, it's got no engines and very, very limited flight capability for the front half. This was a clever touch, and actually if you look carefully, it's backed up visually as well. If you look very carefully, we make the doors the same size, we see that the Tika to Ride ship is way bigger, 2 or 3 times the size. So it's easy to imagine it having plenty of space for some extra engines. A very clever touch from the designers, really well done there. I've got slightly off track, let's get back to the Promised Land. So having jettisoned the rear section of the ship because it was on fire, we then get a comical discussion of how a fire extinguisher might have done a perfectly good job, and how Dave just decided to get rid of the fiery bit. Looking for options, they pull out Starbug's owner's manual, which brilliantly looks just like a typical Haynes manual. After finding out some new but completely irrelevant details about different parts of the ship, Crichton reveals that there is a parachute system. However, upon trying to deploy it, it turns out the cat has used the parachutes to make the shiny suit that he's wearing. Thankfully there's a backup and they do manage to make a successful landing on the moon. We then get one of Crichton's brilliant modes. This is a new one, brilliantly called Apeshit Mode, which essentially is him going wild and enjoying the fact that they managed to survive. With Starbug shown to be stuck on this desert moon, the cat ship descends towards them. Continuing the visual comedy with the cats, we get the Feral King, pointlessly but very typically for a cat, knocking things off the table for his own amusement. His aide then reveals that the Anubis stone seems to be nothing but polished dung, and must be a fake. Seeing their safe landing as yet another miracle, the Holy Cats come and chat with Dave. We then get the Holy Cats coming in and asking Dave a series of completely bonkers questions about why do they have to wash? Why doesn't their head spin all the way around? Why are genitals so ugly? Such insane questions, to which Dave has to dismiss. Trying to resolve the situation of being stuck on the moon, Crichton suggests they try and find some parts of Iron Star that might have also landed, hoping that they might find a teleporter to get them off the moon. We then get a great fun sequence of Dave trying to send Crichton to explain that he's not really a god. Crichton, completely unable to criticise or put down Dave in any way, cannot tell the cats anything other than that he is a wonderful man. Cat then tries, declaring that they're his people. However, after a brief discussion with them, he actually ends up converted to the same religion and joining in their ridiculous songs. Dave despairs that no one seems to be able to criticise him, to which Rimmer steps up to the mark. We get a wonderful little moment here of Craig Charles, I think quite clearly beginning to smirk as Chris Barry walks up to him. I think the directors have left this in intentionally because it's just a wonderful little moment of a little smirk coming across his face, knowing that something brilliantly funny is about to be said. And Rimmer doesn't disappoint. He explains that cometh the hour, cometh the man, before telling us how he actually trained in Breaking Bad news and was particularly proud of a moment when he had to tell a man who just regained consciousness that the paramedics were yet to find his penis. An absolutely brilliant bit of dialogue, delivered brilliantly, and the two guys interacting together was just a brilliant quality moment that was a real standout for me. Before Rimmer can go and talk to the Holy Cats, a piece of the Iron Star falls and narrowly misses Starbug. Crichton reveals that Starbug does have a hovercraft mode and is in fact a hybrid, so can run on electricity. But to help save electricity, they have to turn off non-essential items and turn Rimmer down to low power mode. This makes him black and white and really lo-fi sounding. The cat finds it odd to see Rimmer in this way, as it makes it really obvious that he is indeed a dead man, and begins insulting Rimmer by saying that he has no free will, no consciousness, and that every decision he makes is just a result of a computer program. This throws Rimmer into a full-blown existential crisis, not knowing what his purpose is, whether he's really alive, really dead, really thinking for himself or not. The feral cats then find Starbug and begin shooting. They try and outmaneuver him before deciding that the only thing they can do is fly into the sandstorm and try and hide. They park up during the sandstorm, and Dave and Arnold end up having a really interesting conversation about whether Arnold is really alive. We get some gags in here before a slightly more serious talk from Dave, using the light of the moon as an analogy for Arnold's existence. It's actually quite a touching moment with some really well delivered lines. However, in the midst of this, we also get some brilliant comedy of Crichton arriving and being quizzed by Rimmer as to whether he likes him. Crichton seems to completely malfunction during this, with his face dropping downwards and him declaring that he needs to go and change his head. In the morning, the boys awaken to discover that they have been buried alive by the sandstorm. We get a great reveal of some of Crichton's hidden tools, including a drill on the end of his finger, which he uses to make a hole in the top of Starbug so that he can send one of his spare eyes out to have a look, and confirm indeed that they are in the desert. The boys have a brief conversation about what it means to be a deity, and that while Dave thinks saving Frankenstein and putting himself into stasis was something anybody would do, it turns out not a single one of them at the time would have done that, so Dave's actions were perhaps a bit special. Rimmer then has one of his very rare, helpful moments where he realises that there is a way to get out of the situation, instructing Crichton to put his aerial up through the hole that he just made. They then speak to Holly back on Red Dwarf, who, for unexplained reasons, hasn't yet decommissioned and destroyed the ship. Rimmer then manages to convince new Holly that he should load one of the backups for the old Holly, the version that's 3 million years old. New Holly, thinking this will make him some sort of genius with 3 million years of knowledge and experience, accepts the offer and starts to load up the disk, having no idea that 3 million year old Holly was computer senile. Whilst downloading the backup files, Holly starts to feel a bit peculiar, and as soon as the download fully finishes, we get the iconic line, "What's happening, dudes?" Senile Holly then discusses the idea of simply blowing up the moon with the intention of it throwing Starbug free, but admits he's not really sure if that would work, but fires a missile anyway. The first one misses, but the second one hits, blows up the moon, and it does indeed throw Starbug clear. The Holy Cats, of course, see this as another one of Cloyster's miracles. Holly then radios back in and is absolutely amazed to see that no one is dead, and can't figure out how they managed to survive his terrible plan, before telling them that he'll bring Red Dwarf to come and collect them. The gang, including Rimmer running off of one of Crichton's sockets, triumphantly re-enter Red Dwarf, briefly, before their triumph is cut very short by the fact that the ferals are waiting for them, something which Holly completely forgot to mention. In the ensuing arguments, Lister has to reveal to the Holy Cats that he really is just a man and not a god. He reveals that the apparent miracles were pretty much just all dumb luck, and that Peanut's speech coming back was probably just psychosomatic. Sister Luna despairs that she's wasted her life following a lie, before the Feral King angrily throws the apparently useless Anubis stone back at Lister. We also find out that the cat is the Feral King's brother, his younger brother in fact, which he puts down to a hard life, having to nearly do a day's work. We also find that the reason he was left abandoned on Red Dwarf was that remarkably, he used to be uncool, but swore that from that day he would never be uncool again. The cat mentions just one occasion where he was uncool for a moment, where he just starts to mention Backwards World. We of course all know this is the famous moment when he was in the bushes. Wanting to destroy Lister and everything he represents to the cat people under the guise of Cloyster, the Feral King has a bomb planted on Red Dwarf before putting the gang into the science room. A few moments later, Crichton's battery suddenly goes flat and he shuts down, which means that Rimmer will shortly die as well from lack of power. However, Dave has a sudden realization. Why would you mummify something that isn't important? He smashes the Anubis stone on a desk to reveal a special gold stone inside. This stone is an immense power source which he uses to supercharge Rimmer back into his diamond-like form. At super speed, Rimmer flies through the ship, grabs the bomb, and takes it out into space where it explodes. The gang watches through a window, presuming Rimmer to have been blown up with the bomb. And much to everyone's amazement, even the cat is slightly sad to see him go, as he'll have no one to hate in the future. But a moment later, Rimmer re-emerges in the corridor, looking resplendent in his diamond-like form. The Smeghead by day, the superhero by night. Dave then comes up with a plan and has everyone rush into a spare Starbug, which they fly straight at the cat ship at ramming speed, before Rimmer gets the nod to do what he has to do. And this is built up in a brilliant way where we're expecting Rimmer to perhaps turn into some sort of gun or missile or bomb, but instead he simply points at the cat ship. And being able to manipulate light, from the end of his finger comes an incredibly powerful laser pointer, which he points straight on to the Feral King. A fantastic little moment that sees all of the Feral King's goons suddenly gang up on him and start to attack. As they attack the Feral King, the ship itself flies straight into an asteroid and is destroyed. With the feral cats dealt with, the gang heads to sort out Crichton. They assume they can just recharge him, but it turns out you can't do that to a droid who's been completely discharged. In this case, because Crichton wasn't allowed the full service that he required. So Crichton is effectively dead without a power source, before it occurs to Dave that he could give him the Anubis stone. But Rimmer objects, realising that he won't be able to stay in his diamond-like form without it. However, after some convincing, it's Rimmer himself who places the Anubis stone within Crichton, reviving him and bringing him back to life. Our final scenes are the gang returning the holy cats to the rest of the cat people and asking them what they're going to do now that they know Fushao isn't a real place to head for. The cats tell them that Fushao was never a physical place, but was a place in their hearts. Bizarrely, the cats have chosen Rimmer to be their new god. They've drawn H's on their heads and start dancing and singing in his honour. Rimmer declares it's going to look great on his CV before we cut to the final shot of the show, the cat ships reforming their little squadron into the shape of a H and blasting off into the distance. And there ends our feature-length special. I really enjoyed this one. I loved how the story was put together and presented. I loved that there was kind of two enemies, the feral cats and the new version of Holly. It was great to have two different adversaries. Really fun. I liked all of the stuff in there. I also really liked the mixing of visual comedy with scripted comedy. It was really, really well done. There's some great ideas in here. Top marks from me. So I'd love to know what you guys thought of The Promised Land. Did you enjoy it? Was it everything you'd hoped it would be? Did you want more? Did you think it was too much? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video, then give us a thumbs up, and I'd love to invite you to subscribe if you've not done so already, and hit the bell icon so you know when the next video is out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, Smegheads.